And to kick off the final day of the 50th anniversary speaker series, we're thrilled to be joined by Robin Bradasch. Robin is a citizen of Klawani First Nation who spent the first 12 years negotiating the KFN, Klawani First Nations final and self-government agreements, serving as chief negotiator and director of lands, heritage, and governance. She has served several elected terms as deputy chief of the Klawani First Nation, and since 2005, Robin has worked for Crown and Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada in implementation and negotiations as Manager of Implementation, Director of Governance, and now the Regional Director General for the Yukon, which congratulations, that's an honor. Robin recently finished a 2-year interchange as the Associate Vice President of Indigenous Engagement and Partnerships at the Yukon University, and continues to be actively involved in the governance of the Klawani First Nation as a member of the Constitution Committee, trustee for the KFN Donna Trust, board member for the Shoshone Heritage Society, the Yukon Food Bank, and many things more. Please welcome to the stage Robin Bradasch. Woohoo! Just like to say good morning, Robin, and for the listeners and viewers on Facebook and Shone FM who may not know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your journey?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So my name is Robin Bradasch. I'm a citizen of Klawani First Nation. My parents are Sandra Johnson and the late Chief Joe Johnson. My grandparents were George John and Grace Johnson, and Moose Johnson and Nellie Johnson. And I grew up in Bradasch. Up until I was 14. Didn't have running water up until I was 14 in Bradasch. I always tell people that and they're like, what? And really learned a lot from elders, and especially my dad, who was a chief for a really long time. And in my early 20s, I was called to come back home, and I came home to work on the land claim and self-government agreements. And the rest is history, as they say.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Just in regards to your, just the role in regards to signing of the agreements was only the beginning for many people. How important is the implementation journey today for First Nations, and what will be the key to First Nations success as we move forward together?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing is back then in 1993 and sort of the few years after, as we were signing final agreements, there was this sort of real feeling that that the relationship with governments were going to go away, and that we were just going to sort of like become these governments and thrive. And it really has, I think we've gotten to a point now where we realize that these are just they're ongoing relationships. They're changing, the nature of them are changing, but that there will always be a need for implementation. There will always be a need for our young people to to contribute and push the agreements a little bit farther and continue to build on them.
For sure. And even just from my own First Nation as Teslin-Tlingit Council, we recently, well, not recently now, almost going to say 12 years ago, signed our first First Nation agreement in regards to justice. There's many chapters and many volumes in regards to the obligations and responsibilities that we have when it comes to jurisdiction. How do you see the process for implementation going? Obviously, now that you've now served many years on the Crown side, if you will, and how important is your knowledge from that previous experience working for Klawani First Nation and now in your job today?
I definitely think spirit and intent is an important thing, and having been with Klawani First Nation for so long and negotiating those agreements really does help in sort of in recalling like the root of a particular provision, or why we sort of worded something the way it is. I mean, it has snuck up on me a couple of times where it's come back to
haunt you a little bit. Yeah, fair enough.
Now that I'm on the other side, but yeah, like I think that we really need to go back to Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow as often as we can, because that's really the root and the purpose. And anytime I sort of get a little bit lost, you can go back to that, and it really sort of grounds you, and you realize, everything that we're doing is working towards that ultimate vision.
Mm-hmm. Yesterday we had Mary Jane Johnson on the couch as well, and a lot of discussion just in regards to what the vision was. You're a very small community, somewhat isolated at the same way, or in the same breath, if you will, even though you're located on the Alaska Highway. a lot of the services that other nations and other communities have the privilege of having, such as RCMP, medical services, and a school. How important is it for your nation as Kluane First Nation not only to have these opportunities, but equally as important, you've been fighting for the school. The first letter was sent in 1907, and then still today we're still advocating for that. How important is it for your community to not only be recognized, but also to have the same services that other communities have the privilege of having?
Yeah, I think in terms of being recognized as a government and holding all the same jurisdictions as others is important, and our size does sometimes hinder that. But I think when you go back and you look at history, Kluane First Nation in particular has always really sort of stood out in terms of the things that we push for and the things that, I mean, and when I was in grade 2, our community pulled all of us out of school, out of the Yukon government school system, and they started their own. And that's really had an impact on a lot of KFN citizens, and a lot of us have gone on to some advocacy roles or activist roles. And I think a lot of that was sort of baked into us when we were little, when we were doing those types of things, walking to Whitehorse to raise money to have our own school.
That's right. And Mary Jane also talked about that you graduated from the small community school. What was the feeling and the significance and importance of education? As I mentioned yesterday, I think Kluane First Nation probably has the highest level per capita when it comes to post-secondary education, let alone reaching the highest when it comes to the PhD level of education.
Yeah, and I think that the Kitsidunku, the school that we started when I was in, I think, grade 1, grade 2, really is can be sort of attributed to that success, because there are a lot of us who did go on to post-secondary, and we do have doctors and people with masters and a lot of that. But we also have people like Mary Easterson, Alice Johnson. We have people that, have dedicated their lives to education and the right to education. And we really were taught at a young age that it's a privilege, and that, we need to take the opportunities that are given to us and, get an education and use it to better the lives of everyone if we can.
For sure. And you come from a long lineage of leaders as well. Was there a sense of encouragement or a responsibility for you to get involved and to help advocate? You're still leading today in regards to your position now, which we'll talk a little bit about soon. But was there an intention there, or you felt that sense of responsibility as well?
Yeah, I don't think I realized it growing up. I always tell people, I'm like, my dad used to torture me at the breakfast table with all of this talk about land claims and how important it was. And, but it worked because I obviously was listening. And the other thing is, I think they really, our leaders of tomorrow really sort of taught us by doing. They brought us along. I have memories of sitting, coloring on the floor at Joe Jacko's house with Elijah Smith and Joe Jacko and my dad and others meeting, in the kitchen. And then I didn't realize sort of the significance of it. But then now when I do, it's, you think back of all the opportunities and the time that I was able to spend with really legends when you think about it. I had the privilege of working with Dave Joe for 12 years. And he really taught me everything I know about negotiations. So I think that it does sort of, you see those people that are your heroes and the people that you look up to, and you want to aspire to what they're doing. So I think that that's really where my sort of desire to serve comes from. My dad also talked a lot about it, about being the importance of giving back to your community and participating, and not just working for the nation, but participating, showing up at general assemblies, going to, we all have a role, and that we should be working together. So.
For sure. Now you have a very important role, and congratulations on being selected as the Regional Director General for the territory. Just from a personal perspective, having all that knowledge growing up and obviously the obligation from your nation, now working on the other side, if you will, and Canada recently celebrated its 150th anniversary in regards to being a country and a very strong approach towards reconciliation. How do you utilize your experience that you've had now working for Kluane First Nation in your role today, and not only instructing your team in regards to what needs to happen, but also to ensure that that sense of reconciliation is at the forefront?
Yeah, it's not easy working for
You can
Canada.
lie on the couch if you wish. It's all right. We're here for
And I mean, and it's been a long time now, like almost 18 years. So I think I've really thought a lot about it, and it's really important to have advocates in all levels of government and people who really understand our people. I think is important because we can, be advocates and really provide information about our worldviews and why things are the way they are, so that as we're sort of working towards better agreements, better provisions, all of that, we can really understand why it's important and why we need to really push for those things.
For sure. And I think the relationship is at the critical point, right? And we had the Prime Minister here earlier on this week. His commitment, obviously, to Indigenous people across the country, for me, has been a highlight. And I think we haven't really, as communities, let alone as First Nation governments, for the first 28 years of implementation, the last 6 to 7 years have really been a highlight for me. For you in that regard, what is the opportunities for First Nations? Because I think even with us as a council, at the council level, we've been able to not only access better programming, if you will, for the people, but what do you think is, what can nations do to not only open those opportunities for themselves by working with offices such as yourselves? And what's the benefit, I should say?
Yeah, like I mean, the sort of the amazing thing about Yukon First Nations is they sort of continue to push the bar. And like we have just, like so many of our leaders have just continued to try to expand and move things. And we're starting to see policy change. And so much of the national policy in Canada really has been influenced and driven by Yukon First Nations. I don't know if a lot of people know that we really are considered leaders, and we have been for a long time, and I think will continue to be for a long time. And I think that we've always been very innovative and creative in how we approach things. We heard the other day from Dave, like, I've heard Dave say you can wait out an entire government. Like the patience that Yukon First Nations people have had has been incredible. But also, like I think about the most recent sort of movement on loans to compensation and how, Yukon First Nations never gave up on that. Like they knew at the root of it that there was, they had to continue to push that until it was corrected. And it finally was. And I think we've done that on a whole bunch of different things, really have just continued to push the bar just a little bit at a time and have really made a big difference. The other thing I think Yukon First Nations do incredibly well is they use their agreements and the jurisdiction that they have in those agreements, the authorities that they have, to influence other governments.
Yes.
And really to participate and collaborate in the way Yukon writ large is governed. And I think that they've done that incredibly well.
No, and I appreciate that as well. In regards to this, next question would be a twofold then. What do you feel is the biggest challenge for First Nation governments today, from your perspective?
There's so much capacity. There's so much happening. There's so much we want to do. There's so much in the implementation world, we're always sort of talking about, like, how do we get young people to want to come and work in this field? And they have so much opportunity. Mm-hmm. And then you see this resurgence of culture and heritage and language, and our young people are dedicating their lives to that. You don't want to discourage that. But you still need people to be working on these agreements and continuing to build on them. And so for me, it's like that capacity. How do we get our young people all those opportunities, but still have enough of our people, in the trenches working on these agreements so that the next generation has even more opportunities?
For sure. And equally as important, what do you think is the biggest challenge for the federal government when it comes to today's reality, when it comes to land claims and self-government here in the territory?
I don't know if there's that I can think of something specific to the territory, but I think this sort of the national sort of perspective often is difficult when you're dealing with 650 First Nations, and the vast majority of them are governed under the Indian Act. It's really hard to get that entire system to be able to sort of focus on the agreements that are here and the jurisdictions that are here. But like I said, I think that Yukon First Nations have done a really good job of really pushing other governments to do better in the Yukon.
For sure. And if you're just tuning in to Shona FM or Facebook Live, you're listening to the 50th anniversary speaker series. And we have Robin Bradasch live on the comfy couch today. So just in regards to your recent position as Associate Vice President of Indigenous Engagement and Partnership at Yukon University, what was the purpose, I guess, if you will, of taking that opportunity on? Obviously, the university is in its infancy stage, moving from the college to the university. Now it being established for over 2 years now. What did you want to achieve, I guess, if you will, not only building your own capacity, but the opportunity to help and support, obviously, the infancy stages of the university as well?
The decision to try something new was a really personal one. Like I said, I was like 23, 24 years old when my nation asked me to come home to negotiate the agreements. So I literally left post-secondary and came home to do that and was there right up until we signed the agreements. And then I went right from there into Canada as in implementation. So I've never done anything else. I've only ever, so at that point was like 27 years or something. That's all I'd ever done. So I was feeling a little bit drained. I think I was feeling a little bit frustrated with how long everything takes and, really wanting to sort of look for something else that would sort of get me excited. So that's why I jumped in the first place. But what it really did for me is it really confirmed for me that this is the work that I want to do, that this is so important, and that it's what I'm good at. It's my passion. It's my life. It's something that I've dedicated my life to, and I'm happy to do that. The work at the university was really important, and I enjoyed it. The other thing it did sort of bring home for me, I was telling someone this the other day, but a lot of the people in this room are in our world, know these agreements inside and out. And you forget that the average Canadian or the average Yukoner doesn't. Mm-hmm. So that also was good for me to sort of come out of that world and sort of say, okay, that need for, education and encouragement and really sort of sharing with your, other citizens the importance of these agreements and the role that they can play is really key.
For sure. And yesterday we focused on education all day, and obviously the university has the mandate to provide not only education, but also to create a sense of community. How important is it for us as Yukon First Nations to have not only an identity in an institution such as a university, but also to have significant programming that not only, as you mentioned, educates the general public, but also helps to build that necessary capacity within communities?
I think it's critical. I think in order for us to sort of really get at that capacity issues that First Nations are dealing with and are facing right now, is we have to design programs in a different way. We have to educate a different way. We have to figure out how can we get that support, those education to our citizens when they're in their communities or when they're already working. How do we support to do them? And programs have to be designed with, the Climate Change Fellowship Program is a perfect example. That concept of programming for the whole person and really allowing people to grow mind, body, spirit. Not just the mind is so critical, and that's all about designing programs that are specific with us specifically in mind. Mm-hmm. So, really looking at Indigenous worldviews and how do we incorporate them and how do we get our young people excited. I sit on the Kluane First Nation Dana Trust, and we did a research project a few years ago with a couple other trusts about how do we get young people to consider careers in finance, and why do we have, we don't have a lot of young people that choose that, and there's a number of reasons for that. But really, when we sort of got down to the root of it, and you start talking about worldviews, the Indigenous worldview, especially Potlatch society, on wealth and wealth creation is so fundamentally different than Western society that, our philosophy is to have enough. And once you have enough, you give away the rest. That just doesn't jive with trusts and kind of hoarding away all this money that you can, just doesn't sort of resonate with our young people because they don't understand that. But if you sort of talk to them about it more from a concept of, the importance of having resources available for 7 generations, or that being part of a collective and your responsibility to give back, it becomes a different sort of perspective, I think, for them, and you're more likely to at least get their attention.
Just during your experience with the university, what are some of the biggest challenges First Nation communities are facing today when it comes to education, especially obviously at the post-secondary level?
Well, I think that they all are experiencing capacity issues, but it's hard for individual nations to necessarily address those by themselves, and that there's this real need to collaborate and come together to develop those programs that all of their nations can benefit from. But it's just another one of those things that, on the million sort of boxes that First Nations have to do. It's a hard one for them to get at sometimes, and I think that the university can be a really good partner in that. And we've talked about the Institute for Indigenous Self-Determination and really working to create that institute that could really be about developing programs that are going to create that capacity, but with a real Indigenous worldview in mind.
For sure. And now you have a very important role in your new position. Some of the biggest complaints that First Nation Indigenous people have is just even renewing our status cards, which is people wait up to almost a year to receive that. How can we expedite these processes, let alone talk about certain things such as non-insured health benefits that your portfolio, I think, also has some responsibility. And how do you manage that? Because at one point, you understand where our people have gone. You've lived in small community. And at the same time, you're in a role that can make pivotal changes, not only for our communities, but for the country. As you mentioned, we are a model. So what's going on with our status cards? That's what the question is.
I don't know if I can fix that overnight. But I mean, I do think having people like myself and others in these positions, we understand the ludicrousy of that and why it takes so long and why it's so important. And we, are more, I think we'll be at least more open-minded in how do we, work with our partners to make those processes better. And I hope I can do that at the regional level, but I also have been with the government for 18 years. And that's another one where, like, that status card process, it applies to 650 somewhat First Nations in Canada. And so it's a huge thing. We know we can sort of smooth it out here, but how do we do that in a way? Again, I think it's going to be us sort of leading the nation in a lot of ways. We have to sort of step up and sort of push those things. Well,
my friends in Nunavut, for instance, their nation as a Nunavut government recognizes them individually. They're not a product or a ward of the state as our status cards prove. Is there an opportunity as local nations here to now exercise their right when it comes to citizenship and identify, as Tasman Tlingit Council, for instance, in my world, that we'd produce our own membership cards? Is that something of a possibility that we can work towards, or
in terms of accessing federal programs?
Yeah, and what does that status card give me at the end of the day? Right?
Yeah.
It gives me the bottom of the barrel, unfortunately, when it comes to eyewear. And if you go to the local visionary clinic here, we have a separate place for Indigenous people to shop for their eyewear, and it's not Ray-Bans or Oakleys. It's more, which are actually coming into style, more the old-fashioned. As Judy mentioned yesterday, the bigger glasses there are all coming back into, but we struggle with that, discrepancy when it comes to services that are provided. Is there, I don't know, I'm not trying to dig at you, but I think it's a good opportunity to have discussions. Because a lot of the people in the room and a lot of people on air are struggling with these realities that federal government has put us and still continue to do so today. I just think when you say it's up to the nations, is there really that opportunity for us as nations to take that next step when it comes to ownership, if you will, and responsibility?
Well, I think Yukon First Nations in particular have the jurisdiction. They have the law-making ability to do that. I completely understand why we haven't gone there, because it's a very complex and difficult sort of world. But I do think that we have really sort of led the sort of charge on a lot of other things where we've used that jurisdiction to really influence the way things are done, or the way a government is delivering something. So I do think we have that. We really do have a lot of sort of clout on that side, but we also have the ability to, occupy the field
Yeah.
if we want to. And those are big decisions. They're not easy decisions, and we don't want to take on even more when we already have so much that we have to get to. So it is, I think it's a lifelong thing. We are always going to be, sort of renovating these agreements and figuring out what the next step is. But more and more, like that vision of having a better Yukon, that's really what this is about. And Yukon First Nations are consistently using their ability and their authority to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not here to grind you hard, but I just think the fact that the status card really doesn't provide anything for me, because even when I go to get my eyes checked, I'm asked to use my my benefits package from CYFN first and foremost before I put the obligation back to government. So really, at the end of the day, when it comes to the status card, the only thing that really applies to me is at Native tournament. I have to put my band number on there, and that's really the only usefulness I find that status card to have today. But
really, and the Native hockey tournament should really accept your Tesla card.
I agree.
I'm sure they do, though.
Anyways, to shift gears, just want to talk, obviously we're celebrating 50th anniversary. What does it mean to you in regards to the sacrifices our people have made over the course of your time? And obviously your family is a big part of that as well. What does it mean to you in regards to how we celebrate today and put ourselves back in the forefront, if you will, and and all the trials and tribulations, the sacrifice, the commitments that have been made. But today we honor not only our leaders and our elders and our negotiators of the past, but today we have to honor, where our future is going as well. How important is this celebration to you as an individual?
It's been an incredible week for me in the sense, like, I've done a lot of reflecting about sort of how lucky I have been to have grown up during this period of time in this transition, and to have been, at the table and supported by so many incredible people along the way in my career. So for that alone has been amazing, and just sort of walking a little bit down memory lane, remembering all the people that are no longer with us, but had, taught me so much along the way. But it's also sort of made me think about, okay, what's next and how do we sort of move forward? And I've been also thinking about this resurgence of young people in culture and education, art, culture and language and heritage, and how do we encourage that, but still also continue to work on the agreements. And it struck me that, we paid a price for these agreements in some ways. When you think about, they say we had to form state. That's what they say, right? We had to make ourselves look like the other side of the table in order for them to take us seriously. And that's had an impact on the governance systems that we put into place. And some First Nations have done a lot of work to try to, sort of go back and put some more traditional systems in place. But I really think that this generation that is are so excited about language and culture, are going to be able to sort of really do that work about, rediscovering, reclaiming, and reincorporating Indigenous worldviews on governance, and really ingraining our values and principles into the way we govern. And I think that if we can do that, it's just going to continue to encourage that healing and that growth. And it's the next step. It's full circle, right? Like, we've got the foundations and the jurisdictions that we need to do it. And now we need to sort of take a step back and reclaim some of what we lost along the way.
For sure. And just equally, is what can we take from our previous 50 years that we've learned that will help now assist our next generation for the next 50 years?
That it's okay if it takes a really long time. That is, like I said, when I stepped away for a couple of years, it was, partially because of that. But, it's okay. All good things take time. But also, it's also okay to do it a little bit at a time. Like, sometimes we want to get all the way to the the finish line right away, but sometimes we have to sort of take it in legs, and that's okay too. And I also think we have to sort of accept that we can't do it all at once. And so we have to sort of make decisions on what we're going to focus on and how we're going to move forward, and just be okay with that.
Sounds good. And just to wrap things up, Robin, if you were able to pen a letter to Elijah Smith from the future, what would it say?
his vision is just sort of like Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow in general kind of still blows my mind every time I open it, because there's no bitterness, there's no anger, there's just this hope and this vision for a better place, not only for their children, but everyone that lives in the Yukon. And so I think that, other than thank you, I think that sort of that teaching us sort of how to sort of dream, I guess, in a lot of ways, was really important. And every time I look at it and open it, I'm like, these leaders literally came off the land to deliver this document. And when you look at the concepts that are in it and the vision and the sort of the hopes and dreams that they had, it's really quite incredible, even today. So, yeah, I think I would first and foremost thank him, but I'd also sort of tell him how right he got it.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Well, thank you very much, Robin. I really want to thank you very much for your commitment. The same with the vision of our people had together today was to see our people in institutions such as Indigenous Services Canada being leaders as well. And I think you being now at the highest of the totem pole, if you will, I think really bodes well to this vision as well. And I just want to congratulate you with that. And also with a little token of our appreciation for your time today, we'll give you a little gift. But anyone's big round of applause for Robin Bradasch.